Travis County Sheriff's Office has done, I think that if you've been watching what Travis County Sheriff's Office has been doing, we have reached out to the community in so many different ways for citizens that are here legally and illegally. One of the things that we have done, we've went up to the flea market, and family violence is a big issue in all communities. And we have victim services out there passing out pamphlets, talking with these individuals that are patronizing the flea market. The other thing is that there's been folks that have come to the sheriff's office that are concerned about some of the misinformation that's being spread out there by my opponent and some of the surveys. I think that that's one of the reasons that there's such a fear in the community. But we have teamed up with the Interfaith Ministries, which is a conglomeration of 40 or 50 churches, where we have worked with them to put together a training program where because oftentimes individuals come to us and say that, they don't give us a name, they just say that. We have come up with a plan to if there's a concern that they have been racially profiled or been mistreated by a law enforcement officer, the individual in-faith ministry has a liaison that will give the name and be the contact for that individual. They will get the information, get the report, they will bring it to us over at Travis County Sheriff's Office, and we will look into it. Once we look into it, even if it's not our agency, we will look into it, and if we find that there was some wrongdoing, we would pass it over to the department. We have done 2 or 3 trainings over at the Sheriff's Office with a lot of these different church members that have been part of that. There haven't been any complaints that came to us, but you can talk with I guess it's the law enforcement arm of the Interfaith Ministry. They have been part of this dialogue for over 2 or 3 years.
Sisson, what can law enforcement do to mitigate the erosion of trust in the immigrant community and work with the community to ensure the safety of all its members?
Number one, my opponent tends to blame everybody else for his problems in Travis County, what he has done in Travis County. Number one, the thing is that you can go out there and do all the public service thing, all the public service announcements, go to the flea markets, talk to people, encourage immigrants to come in and report crimes. But when you have the highest rate of deportations and non-criminals, you're stopping people for traffic violations, and you're arresting them, and you're holding everybody for deportation. That's where the fear comes in. Now, APD, and again, I'm not bragging on APD, but I come from a large police department. For many, many years, we have strived to get the trust of the Hispanic community and the immigrant community. We've set up banks so they put money in the banks because we got tired of it was sad to see immigrants lying dead on the street because they got robbed with the money in their back pocket or they got beat up. So we finally got the trust, we got banks set up to put money in. We went out and we finally got the trust of immigrants to report family violence. And I say the highest rate. We do have the highest rate of deportation in the United States of non-criminal. I'm not talking about all of it. I have an analysis here where a professional did this for me the other day, and I'm going to read it to you really quick. According to the Center of Constitutional Rights, 4 out of 5 people who are deported from Travis County through the Secure Communities Program have no criminal history. No criminal history. In fact, Travis County's deportations have the highest proportion of non-criminals for any other jurisdictions, 494 of them to be exact, where secure communities had been implemented at the time of the study. To put this in perspective, on average, only 1 in 4 individuals reported through secure communities is a non-criminal. Even in infamous Maricopa County, Arizona, only about half of their deportees are non-criminals. Yet we're 4 out of 5. Yet in Travis County, 4 out of 5 individuals who are deported are non-criminals, more than 3 times the national average. And the thing is, it all boils down to, in order to get the trust of the Hispanic community, you have to let them know and you have to make them feel safe that because they get stopped for a traffic violation or they're going to anytime they enter the correctional institute at Travis County, they're not going to be held for immigration. There's another piece of paper that he's handed out to all his stuff. And he fails to read the top part of this line here. It's in the back open. Let me tell you the bottom part. What it says here is that secure communities, there's two parts. The transformation of information, that's mandatory, where all of the fingerprints taken at the jail.
Well, you will have to.
Well, I just passed out, I've got a lot of things to say. I just passed out the law, and on the if you look at D down there, if you read D, it says that upon determination by the Department of Detainment for an alien not otherwise detained by the criminal justice agency, such agency shall maintain custody of the alien for a period not to exceed 48 hours, excluding Saturdays, Sundays, and holidays. He's been a police officer for 31 years, he says. And he knows the difference between shall and may. In law enforcement, you look at that may and you look at that shall. Shall means that you will do that. And I know that I was at a meeting the other day, and there was an attorney that I asked to read this, and he chose not to. He only wanted to go on the request.
Okay, that's a 30 seconds. We had not factored in time for rebuttals, so we may have to move forward into this. We're giving rebuttals with each question. So we may have to curb the number of questions we're doing. So that sets the standards now for 30-second rebuttals. Sorry, I'm probably with the rules. Okay. Mr. Sisson, this next question will begin with you. Both the Sheriff's Office and Austin Police Department are entrusted with addressing the public safety needs of the community as a whole, including the immigrant community. The APD and the Sheriff's Office have demonstrated at times conflicting approaches to interacting with the immigrant community. APD, for example, established a nationally recognized program to protect unbanked and in many cases undocumented immigrants from petty theft. While the Sheriff's Office is the authority responsible for the local jail, it is required by state law to collaborate with Immigration and Customs Enforcement under the Secure Communities Program. Mr. Sisson, what do you understand to be the requirements of the Sheriff's Office under the Secure Communities mandate? And how can you collaborate with municipal law enforcement to ensure the safety of all Travis County residents?
Okay. Number one, Sheriff Hamilton reads A. A says immigration detainers notice of action to any other federal agency or local law enforcement agency. A detainer serves to advise another law enforcement agency that the department seeks custody of an alien presently in the custody of that agency for the purpose of arresting and removing the alien. The detainer is a request that such agency advise the department that they have one in custody. You don't have to. What he's reading down here is that if you do advise federal government that you have an immigrant detained, then you shall hold that person for 48 hours. And if you read the title, temporary detention of department request. Now, you know, he says shall, this is a request. I don't care what he says, it's a request. And just like usual, he doesn't read the top line, he'll go all the way to the bottom line. And then also, let me read this, financial responsibility for detention, no detainer issued as a result of the determination made under this chapter shall incur no fiscal obligation on the part of the, she shall incur any fiscal obligation on the part of the department until actual assumption of custody of the department except as provided by paragraph. So in other words, you know, the federal government does not have to pay for 48 hours. It's grant money that pays for that. And what I'd like to ask the sheriffs to come up with some checks, come up with some figures to show where immigration has given Travis County money for the 48 hours. Another thing with the trust of the community law enforcement, you need to work real closely with all law enforcement agencies. You need to cooperate with them. You need to work closely with them. You need to get with them, and you need to join forces. And I'm not just talking about APD, I'm talking about DPS, Constable's Office, all entities of law enforcement within this Travis County, because we have numbers. And when you join force together, you have a stronger unit. You know, APD has a hate crimes unit. Travis County should have a hate crime unit. They should be working closely with them. If I'm not mistaken, I think they do work closely with the trafficking and stuff. But, you know, to what extent? So they should have some type of a task force unit that works very closely together. And, the secure communities, like I was going to say, there's two parts. The transformation of fingerprints to DPS, to FBI, and back to Homeland Security, where they determine someone's undocumented, is mandatory. But what they do is they send a request. A request and shall are two different things. A request is asking you, can you hold them? You don't have to. Once you hold them, once you say, okay, we'll honor your request, then you shall detain them for 48 hours. So if you will read that whole pamphlet, you will understand what he's saying.
The second question?
Yes, Sheriff Hamilton, what do you understand to be the requirements of the Sheriff's Office under secure communities? And how can you collaborate with municipal law enforcement to ensure the safety of all residents?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that our relationship with the local law enforcement, all law enforcement, is exceptional. We work closely with all of law enforcement. Matter of fact, prior to me being sheriff and the chief hospital being the chief, the sheriff and the chief really didn't talk to each other. There was a power struggle. But I would like for you all to, don't believe me, don't believe Sisson, go to an attorney and ask them, and I'm not talking about any attorney in here. If you go to the county attorney and ask them, or the district attorney, that he's twisted. You don't just read one piece of the law as far as shall. Shall means shall. And it means what it says. And he can twist it, slice it up any way you want to. It says shall. That you will do it. He talked about money. The Department of Justice, or the Homeland Security, they do pay for those days that we keep these individuals for the weekend and the holidays. So he's totally wrong on that particular issue. One of the other things that he said earlier about that Travis County has the highest deportation. I'm going to read this with you before I leave. Right here, you see this blue tab, and you see all the rest of these tabs here. The blue tab is Travis County. All the rest of these tabs are the number of deportations across the country. This is a report from ICE. This is ICE numbers. These are the real numbers. This is not a study that somebody did. These are the numbers that they report to their auditor. You'll see that Travis County is not even close to number one.
So what I can do is I can scan those, I'll scan it, document, and I'll email it out to these numbers.
Okay, and it's got a glossary. It's got a glossary on the back to explain. And I want you to know that people do not come to, Travis County is the keeper of the jail. People don't come to Travis County Jail because we arrest them. I've got numbers here where APD, these Class C misdemeanors that my opponent is talking about, APD historically since 2000 have averaged around 89% of Class C arrested. I want you to know that Travis County Sheriff's Office was the lead on a program called Cite and Release. That's where a couple of Class A and Class B misdemeanors where you had to take these people to jail because the code said shall take them to jail. It didn't say request take them to jail. It said shall to take them to jail. We went to the legislature and got Kurt Watson and Elliot Nation. As a matter of fact, I believe the young man in the back testified in the bill. Brett Spicer was one of the bill. That was a bill that Travis County went to stop bringing these individuals to jail on these low-level crimes. So we're doing something about it. For him to sit there and say that we're not doing anything is ludicrous.
You have 30 seconds to move on.
Okay, Well, my rebuttal is that, the sheriff is wrong. If you look at those stats, what I'm talking about is non-criminals, people with minor violations. Those stats show all violations, felonies, robberies, everything. He's, like I said, he's giving you misinformation. Again, what you need to do is look at the non-criminals, people with traffic violations, people with misdemeanor theft, misdemeanor possession of marijuana that are being held in the Travis County Jail. He says he's the keeper of the jail. No, he's not the keeper of the jail. He's the sheriff, the most powerful position in Travis County. And he,
We should have a whip for this.
Now, actually, why am I telling you yourself? Sheriff Hamilton, you will be going first on the next question. In the fight against organized crime and human trafficking, T and U visas are important tools. These visas facilitate victim cooperation with authorities in the pursuit and prosecution of the most egregious criminal actors. Historically, these tools have been underutilized by law enforcement at all jurisdictional levels. How can the Sheriff's Department ensure that its members proactively identify and support the T and U visa candidates that it encounters?
We use it wholeheartedly. Matter of fact, over the last month, I've signed four U visas. Matter of fact, I had a class here for law enforcement at Travis County. Our people did the training for the U visa training to get other law enforcement agencies to get involved with the We are very involved with the U visa.
Mr. Sisson, how can the Sheriff's Department ensure that its members proactively identify and support the T and U visa candidates that it encounters?
well, number one, what you do is you want to educate all your officers when they go out to family violence calls to educate immigrant families and all families what their rights are about the UV visas. A lot of them don't even know that they can get it, and it needs to be on the pamphlet. The victim services pamphlet that they hand out, there should be a separate pamphlet for immigrants to assure that they know about the visas. I am all for these visas because you know as well as I do that if they get deported sometime after the abuser gets deported, then they're probably going to want to get killed in Mexico or wherever they're from. And the thing is, I think they should not only do they should have this visa, they should have permanent residency here to protect them.
Sheriff Hamilton, anything to add since
Well, after this meeting, I'll go to my car and pull out our pamphlet and give it to you about it explains all of that. It's in English and Spanish.
Okay, next question. Mr. Sisson, you'll be responding first to this one. National studies of immigration enforcement operations have identified various adverse effects that enforcement activities visit on children, communities, and families. For example, the separation of families due to detention or deportation can lead to both financial and societal costs to the community through the removal of the primary caregiver, the placement of children in CPS, and or the deportation of children away from their families. The impact on families can demoralize and in some cases financially drain traditional family support institutions such as churches, schools, and nonprofits. Central Texans have not been immune to these effects. There have been documented cases of teenagers in Williamson County who have been deported away from their family because of truancy issues. Travis County families have also felt the impact of secure communities. In the first 10 months of the program's operation, 82% of total deportations under secure communities in Travis County were either convicted of a minor offense or not convicted of a crime at all. A significant number of Travis County residents, in particular children, could be affected if the deportation of non-criminal immigrants continues. What role can the Sheriff's Department play in mitigating the effects of enforcement on children and families and or curb the number of non-criminal arrests under secure communities?
Okay. As sheriff, what I want to do is create an advisory committee made up of somebody from each community within Austin. Get our heads together, get with immigration, and say, we're not gonna honor these requests. We're gonna work this law like Obama intended for it to be, to focus on violent criminals, felons, serious criminals, the worst of the worst, people that you and I don't want in this country. This act, this immigration act from Obama was not intended to focus on non-criminals, but it's gone array. It's been abused, and the first thing I want to do is basically get with immigration, say, look, we're not going to do this anymore. We will hold the serious criminals, the violent criminals, the people that you and I don't want in this country, and that way it saves from these non-criminals, these fathers from getting deported. I mean, look at the social services, you know, and he'll say all he can say about victims of family violence report. I've already talked to APD family violence. I've talked to Travis County family violence. They said their reporting of victims of family violence has gone way down. You know, how can you get a number if they're not reporting crimes? How can you he should be signing 20, 30 visas a month. I mean, I don't know how many he does, but what I'm saying is that, you know, the trust needs to be there with the Hispanic community. The impact, the tax impacts on us as social services. You take the father away from the equation, and we're paying for the mom and the kids. We're supporting through social services. The bottom line is, your sheriff, I am going to do what I can to stop this deportation of non-criminals in Travis County. He talks about the site and release. Give them a ticket. You stop an immigrant, and he has any type of identification, whether it's a Mexican driver's license, a blue card, green card, whatever. As long as you can identify that person, you give them a citation. Give them a site and release so they can show up, because you've already identified that person.
Sheriff Hamilton, what role can the sheriff's office play mitigating the effects of enforcement on children and families, and or curb the number of non-criminal arrests under secure communities?
Okay, first of all, let's go to the site and release that Sisson just talked about. Site and release is, I just told you about 89, 90% of those site and release offenses that are brought to my jail is from the agency that he just left from. At one form, he said that there was a policy that prevented the officers out there from arresting Class C misdemeanors. The site and release addresses those particular issues, and that's the very agency that he just came from. And he's talking about letting go. Travis County was the first in the state to implement that particular program. Matter of fact, we received calls from all over the state where people were saying that we were decriminalizing the use of marijuana. Because a certain amount of marijuana, you were able to, right after the site and release passed, you were able to write a ticket. APD didn't jump on board for a while, and they slowly are doing it slowly right now. So he brings up site and release. Travis County went full force from the get-go on this particular program. We were the ones that got this, helped author this particular bill, so that we wouldn't have to bring these low-level offenders to jail. And Travis County encouraged the other folks to do it. And now there's still some counties that are not doing site and release because they refuse to. The district attorney refuses to address those particular issues, so they don't have site and release. That's where, instead of taking them to jail, you just write them a ticket, and they have to show up over at the JP's 2 weeks later, and they will get walked straight through. So he talks about site and release. Site and release, the agency where he comes from, barely is implementing that particular program. So.
I sure would. APD has 1,700 officers. Travis County has 270. You do the math. Number two, site and release. APD's been doing it for many, many years. As a patrolman on the street 20 years ago, I've been doing it for possession of drug paraphernalia, all that other stuff. And if they're not doing it, if they just started it like he said, then that's something new to me. But the bottom line is, when someone comes to Travis County Jail, the Travis County Jail, it's in his hands now, and he has the determination whether to hold them or not. Doesn't matter who arrests them or how many they.
Same with the lease just passed, so he's talking about 20 years ago, I don't know what he's talking about.
Okay, well, gentlemen, thank you very much. That completes the prepared questions we have. We have received at least 2 questions from Attorney Bishop, if you're willing to stick with the same rules. Will your time allow? Okay. And we'll begin then this question with Sheriff Hamilton.
So there are a couple of quotes that I've been asked to read through all and then ask you a question. Local law enforcement are not mandated, this is a quote, local law enforcement are not mandated to honor an ICE detainer, and in some jurisdictions they do not. ICE, at a briefing to the Congressional Hispanic Caucus. In Bucher versus the City of Indianapolis, the court determined that an immigration detainer is not a criminal warrant, but rather voluntary request that the law enforcement agency advise DHS prior to the release of the alien in order for DHS to arrange to assume custody. Another one is, the question is an ICE detainer a request or requirement? Answer, it's a request, there's no penalty if they don't comply. ICE, in the email Q&A. And the question is, if you have discretion to refuse some requests, how would you exercise it? What requests would you refuse and what requests would you accept?
I don't think you have the right to refuse. I just showed you the one that says shall. Yeah.
History, he or she has no criminal history, then that person will be released and go through the normal course, just like anybody else. If it requires a citation, it requires a bond, they are released. I will, secure communities can sometimes with the fingerprint processing can be a good thing, because what you do is you find somebody, let's say somebody gets arrested for a traffic violation, to get criminal history comes back, and this guy's been handled for murder before, robbery, assault, all kinds of violent crimes, but he has nothing on him now. That person needs to be deported. So you need to have policies, you need to have a committee to review these and go case by case. But if it's a non-criminal, a traffic citation or flagrant violation, they are released. He's wrong, he needs to stop blaming everybody else, he needs to look at the law, just like you said, it's a request, it's not shall.
Sheriff Hamilton, you may certainly have your 30-second rebuttal, but I've had another question that ties into this, and it's specifically for you. So with permission, I'd like to read it, and you can have extra time for your rebuttal in light of this as well, if you like. If the county attorney or district attorney were to confirm that honoring requests for ICE detainers is not mandatory, would you stop honoring these requests?
Yeah.
Anything you'd like to add beyond?
No,
We'll
it
stop.
says shall.
Okay. Okay. Great. Mr. Sisson, I believe we're with you now, correct? Okay. In recent months, the immigrant community has seen a rise in arrest of domestic violence victims who are erroneously classified as the aggressor, arrested, and then put into deportation proceedings. This jeopardizes the safety of domestic violence victims, reinforcing the cycle of violence, and erodes trust between immigrant communities and law enforcement. What would you do to prevent this problem from occurring?
So you said they're released? Read that again.
In recent months, the immigrant community has seen a rise in arrest of domestic violence victims who are erroneously classified as the aggressor, arrested, and then put into deportation proceedings. This jeopardizes the safety of the domestic violence victims, reinforces the cycle of violence, and erodes trust between immigrant communities and law enforcement.
Number one, whenever, the deputies need to be trained strictly on how to handle family violence calls. If you go to a call, you need to make sure who's the aggressor. You need to look at marks, you need to look at injuries, you need to look who's the aggressor. If there's two, then they both have injuries, and you don't know which one is the aggressor, then you need to call a supervisor over there to make the decision. Because You don't wanna, I'm not gonna, my deputies aren't gonna go there and just arrest, a person because they're an immigrant, saying that they're the accuser. You have to have probable cause and reasonable suspicion to know who the aggressor is. And if you can't determine who the aggressor is, call a supervisor on the scene and let them make a decision. What that does, you implement strict policies on that, and you can gain the trust of the immigrant population, because at least they'll know that you're not gonna arrest somebody just because they're an immigrant and accusing them of being the accuser. You have to have probable cause.
Sheriff Hamilton? Do you need me to read the question again?
If you may.
Okay, yes, it is long. I need to read it out. Okay, if I can encapsulate. In recent months, the immigrant community has seen a rise and arrest of domestic violence victims who are falsely classified as the aggressor, arrested, and then put into deportation proceedings. This jeopardizes the safety of domestic violence victims and reinforces the cycle of violence, as well as eroding trust with the law enforcement community. What would you do to prevent this problem from occurring?
Well, first of all, Travis County, when we go to a call, we don't ask if you're here legally or illegally. We go there to address whatever the issue is. And then our deputies determine if family violence has occurred, that can actually occurred. And at that particular time, the officer will take into custody the aggressor. It's up to that officer to determine. I believe our officers are trained well enough if there is a sign of family violence, our officers are trained well enough to select which one of those individuals. And I know that at times that our officers have asked the individuals to separate because it looked like it was mutual combatants on each other. So those individuals were asked. One of the individuals were asked to leave, and the other one stayed in the property. So our officers are trained well enough to determine.
So, I think, I hate to put someone else's question. So, let me ask this question and then get to follow so we began, I believe, last time with Mr. Sisson. So, Sheriff Hamilton, how can you save some taxpayer money?
Well, we are doing that right now as far as with our garden. We had a organic gardening out at the Travis County Sheriff's Office. It's about 5 acres. And that food is going into our jail. Matter of fact, we are in the process of doing away with canned goods. There's always going to be a time when there's going to be a shortage or a spell on the vegetables in which we grow. But right now, we have the people that are incarcerated. They're out there harvesting the vegetables. It's therapeutic for them. And we grow year round. The other thing that we've done to save money is that over a long period of time, Travis County Sheriff's Office had a program which is all over the country called work release, where the individual would go to work in the daytime and then come back at night and report back at the jail. That required us to keep a building open, to have officers there, to also to feed them and all of the utilities there for the building. We have done away with the work release program. We have about 200 people as of today in the program that we changed the name to Sheriff's Weekend Alternative Program. These are nonviolent individuals who are sent by the judge to do community service. Some of that community service is done at the jail. They come and cut the grass. They paint. They help us paint, so that we don't have to go out and contract out. It's oversaw by it's supervised by a painter. So these individuals are able to keep our assets up to speed and not tear them down. So we're saving a bunch of money on that. And while doing that, we're also allowing that individual that's been assigned to SWAT programs instead of work release. They're able to do their job and they're able to go home at night with their jobs.
Mr. Sisson, how okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, there's several things that I want to do as sheriff to save taxpayers some money. Number one is stop the unnecessary deportation of non-criminals. A lot of them slip through the cracks. I don't know the number, but people slip through the cracks and then they're held for more than 48 hours at the cost of the Travis County Sheriff's Department. And I'm not blaming this on him because a lot of times administrations, things do happen, but strict policies need to be implemented where people don't slip through the cracks after 48 hours. And you have to make sure immigration is paying you for it to release them. Number two is to restructure the Sheriff's Department and take a lot of non-essential employees within and put them back on the street instead of having to ask for more deputies to from the Commissioner's Court. Take a non-essential employee, see what kind of what jobs they're doing to see if civilians can do the same job for half the pay. Put the deputies back on the street. Number three is try to create a separate mental health unit within the jail. The jail. I know this has been a problem with the Sheriff's Department for a long time. He said the other day that they have like 400,000 mental health patients a day at one. 400 or something. He said the other day, 300 to 400. Patients in the jail, and that's ridiculous. And if you have that many taking up space within the jail, surely there's something you can do where you can make a separate unit. I've gotten with some directors of ASH where they said they will supply people to work those separate units just strictly to maintain and to attend the mental health patients and try to release them as fast as you can. Other thing is the garden he's talking about. You know, what is the cost of the FTEs that he has to work in these gardens? I may be wrong, but I know. Well, I'm not even going to say it. But anyway, these are a lot of tax saving dollars that you can make. And another thing I wanted to say real quick is that if you took all the immigrants from the state of Texas will lose $69.5 billion. You can imagine what we're losing in city and city revenue and taxes within Travis County.
I feel like this is, we have one more question. We have a few more moments. It is a question that may take some nuancing. But presuming an incident in which someone may have been, or feels they've been deported, detained or deported because of racial profiling, how could they, in what way could they file a complaint or pursue a complaint once they've been deported? And who did we start with last time? The sheriff, so this time, Mr. Sisson, would you like to start?
Well, I'm sure the sheriff has an internal affairs already in place, and what will happen if there's a racial, number one, there's statistics that are, all agencies have to report or send in statistics on stops that they make. Some state agent, I'm not really familiar, the sheriff's probably more familiar with it than I am, but the state puts these statistics together, and if they see that an officer is in like a predominantly white area and they're stopping mainly Hispanics, then they're gonna send something back to the sheriff or the police chief and say, hey, this is what's going on, and then the sheriff and the police department or the police chief will address that. But there has to be strict policies against racial profiling. There has to be accountability. And basically, I would direct that person to the Internal Affairs Division and let them make a thorough investigation and then have a panel and then myself as the sheriff to look at it. And if racial profiling did occur and the officer did racial profiling, the officer needs to be held accountable.
Sheriff Hamilton.
You don't read it. First of all, our racial profiling report is mandatory every year. Ours just came out. We have not had an incident of racial profiling reported since 2006. And our numbers are pretty consistent with the breakdown of our demographics here. So as far as racial profiling, I'm going to give y'all permission to go else.
If I may, though, gentlemen, I understand that you've explained the processes or possibilities if someone's been detained, but what if they've been deported? How can they contact? Or are they made aware of their rights prior to deportation?
They can file a claim while they're in jail.
Okay.
And we will look into that.
Well, can I,
Yeah, exactly.
30 seconds? Well, the thing is that once you're detained, for a detainer, you're basically put in a hole. You don't have any rights. You don't get to visit anybody. I think you can see your attorney. But how can you report it when you're deported? Now, if you wind up coming back to the United States illegally again, then I guess you can report it. But once you've been deported, you're really in a hole. And, and I understand you're saying he's correct, that, they can report it, but if they can get a hold of the sheriff's department.
But he's totally wrong about that. You can't have visitors if you don't have a defender. And we also made a comment before that once an individual has a detainer on them, that they can't get bond. We have released several people where ICE has not come back in 48 hours, and they have missed the mark. We let those individuals go.
Chair Hamilton, thank you. We would like to give you both the opportunity to have.
Ask each other questions.
I'm sitting way too close for that. Makes me uncomfortable. But to give you 3 minutes to speak on whatever issue or whatever statement you'd like to make to the immigrant services community. Unless.
I do. One of the first one. That's okay. Well, I'm John Sisson, Travis County Sheriff. Everybody knows where I come from, APD. What I was explaining, that there's 2 parts of secure communities. The processing of fingerprints, which is mandatory. Everybody that gets put in the jail, their fingerprints have to be taken, sent to DPS, sent to the federal government, and then if there's, and he may know the process better than I do that, but my research shows that they'll if they suspect that someone's an immigrant, or if it's on the booking sheet that they are born anywhere other than the United States, it'll be sent to Homeland Security. Homeland Security determines if someone's an immigrant or undocumented. A request will be sent to the sheriff's department to hold that person. As your sheriff, like I said, I'm not going to honor that request. Santa Clara, California, if you look that up, and he brought that up where the sheriff and the DA was mad about it, but it was the county seat or the county council, whatever, that said we are going to opt out. That under no circumstances will they wrote a letter to the immigration. Under no circumstances will we hold any immigrants for you. Will we even notify you that there's an immigrant in our jail unless we come up with a written agreement, a secure written agreement, which I don't think the sheriff's department has with immigration, some type of a contract, some type of written agreement, to where the only ones that we will hold is serious criminals, felons, violent criminals, the worst of the worst, basically. They have a category of who they would hold. And if immigration wanted to come into the jail, they would have to have a criminal warrant to interview or to talk to anybody else. Now, I don't know if that's the case in the state of Texas. I think they may have a free will, I'm not sure. But that's something that I will address. Another thing is the taxpayers' dollars. I mean, we're losing a lot of money. I mean, we're paying a lot of social services for immigrant families that are fatherless. I have several, people that I know have been deported. I mean, their kids have been here for many, many years. There's stories we all know of college students that came over to the United States at 2 years old, and then 18, 19 years old in the middle of college, they get deported. This is unnecessary deportation.
Well, first of all, I would have to totally, some of the things he said was untargeted, but on the most part it wasn't. One of the things that I want you to know, the Travis County Sheriff's Office over the last 8 years have been involved in this community like no other. We are very involved in this community, and I can tell you that we are very caring. And when you talk about individuals that get separated from their families, those kids, I want you to know that I see this on every month and a half when I go to clean. My mom is 82 years old and she's a foster parent. And every time I go into her house, and it's all little kids, is what she takes. Matter of fact, I was there last night, and she's got 4 small kids. We got 2 white, 1 black, and 1 little Hispanic kid. This one, I call it the Rainbow Coalition over there, and she just laughs, and she just loves those kids to death. She's been a foster mom for probably 5 or 6 years, and so I understand, and I can see the heart in these kids, in these kids' faces to be separated from their families. But at the same time, when I took office, I raised my hand that I was going to obey the laws of the United States and of this state. And that, here I've got a guy that's sitting next to me that is saying that he's not going to abide by the law, because that law that I showed you, it clearly says shall, that you shall hold these individuals for 48 hours, regardless. And if they do not come in 48 hours, then you can release those individuals, and that's what we're doing. And I hear individuals talk about that they have heard them say that they have been in there for 2 to 3 months, or 4 or 5 weeks over the 48 hours. Well, I ran the numbers. I've got the numbers, and I can tell you that from January 1st of 2011 to December 31st, 2011, Travis County Sheriff's Office booked in 58,951 inmates. Out of that, 3,094 had ICE detainers put on them. That's 5% of the 58,000. Out of that 3,000, 72.59 people were released. 2,246 were released to ICE. Out of those 2,246, 1,502 remained in custody less than 2 days after the local charges were dropped. 744, 33%, remained in custody more than 2 days after local charges. Out of that 744,
I'm sorry. It's,
well, we still got no more questions.
we have no more questions.
So can I finish this?
Um,
I'm got a little bit more.
I can say a few more.
okay. We'll let you finish and then we'll give Mr.
Okay.
Sisson 30 seconds.
1,502 remained in custody less than, that's out of the 2246, stayed less than 2 days after local charges, which is the 48 hours. Out of that, 744, that's 33%, remain in Travis County custody more than 2 days after local charges. So that 744. Out of that 744, 723 stayed after local charges were disposed of, including a weekend. 10 of them, 1.34 of those did not include the weekend, but did include the holiday. The average length of stay in our jail was 2.08 days. That's counting the weekend. So all these people talking about 3 months, 4 months is not true. These are numbers.
30 seconds? Good. I'm a very highly decorated officer within APD. I have a 30-year honorable conduct medal, which means I've never had a sustained complaint in APD. That's very unusual. I am a very law-abiding citizen, and when I took the oath of office to enforce all laws in the United States and the city of Austin and the state of Texas, that's the oath that I gave, and that's the oath that I will stand by and that I will do that. This is a request. This is not a law. And you know, for him to attack me on my credibility and the oath of office is just uncalled for.
Gentlemen, thank you very much for coming and sharing and responding to the concerns of the community. Since we did offer to share some materials with our members, we're happy to do so. If you have follow-up facts or figures that are from reports, but we won't be able to share campaign information.
And you're not going to be able to scan this, because a lot of pages, so you will probably have to make copies
I should scan it into a PDF. Okay.
That's next. She's got demos.
For everybody, I have some pamphlets at the back that explain all my research and gives you a lot of information. You're welcome to pick one up on your way out so you can read it and you'll know what I'm talking about.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.